Hello and welcome to a historic first episode of Remy and Nathan von Bram's German revision podcast. Not German history revision podcast.
Yes, let's be clear about that.
Let us, first of all be clear. And it's not all of German history, it is more from the unification through to the end of the Nazi era. So, Nathan, take it away.
Wow, hope you enjoy. We're going to start off with German unification.
Okay.
So, Remy, when was Germany, so to speak, unified again?
I would have said it was kind of 1870 to 1871.
Yeah, who's the big guy behind it was
Otto von Bismarck himself. Fun Otto von Bismarck story. Once I was in a place called Oxford, and there was an Austrian guy with a very nice roller neck jumper, and he just hated Otto von Bismarck. He claimed that Otto von Bismarck's form of nationalism is basically what Hitler himself inherited, but we shall be exploring that in future episodes.
Okay, yes we will. So, to begin with, we're just going to talk a little bit about the constitution, the structure of Bismarck's Germany. Yeah. He used the driving force behind the Germany that unified in 1871. So, who was the big daddy, the guy at the top of the constitutional structure? I'd say it was the Emperor. The
Emperor, also known as the Kaiser.
Of which state of Germany?
Yeah, of Prussia.
Yeah.
Prussia, we'll add, just in the unification was the strong. It had the coal, it had the resources. It was Prussia rather than Austria, which was the driving force towards unification. The Prussia-Austrian War resulted in a Prussian victory, for example.
Yeah.
But the Kaiser wasn't an absolutist monarch, was he, that end?
Even though some of them, Wilhelm II, as we will later find out, like to think he was. He wasn't. He did have a lot of powers, though. For example, appoint and dismiss the Chancellor, who was Bismarck at the time. Mm-hmm. Could dissolve the Reichstag, but had to be with the consent of the Bundesrat. He kind of directed Germany's foreign policy, had a bit less impact when it came to domestic, and he was the commander-in-chief. So, I think the big next part of the constitutional structure is the Chancellor and his government, the imperial government.
So he was accountable only to the Emperor, I believe.
Not to the Reichstag.
And
that's the big key.
That's an important bit.
Yeah.
And he's able to propose new laws, but to the Reichstag, but he wasn't dependent on their support. So basically, if he got on well with the Emperor, the Kaiser, then he stayed for a long time.
Yeah. So the Reichstag is very important in what we're saying, the fact that it's not an absolute monarch, because although it had limitations, the Reichstag was, for that period anyway, quite democratic, would you not say? Yeah,
they had universal male suffrage for over 25 males. They could agree or reject laws proposed by the Kaiser or his government. They could pass various motions and budgets. Oh yeah, over the army in particular.
Yeah. So although it was could not introduce its own legislation, it did have, decent amount of power over legislation.
Yeah, it had to actually pass it.
Yeah.
For it to pass.
The final kind of part of the federal bit of the constitutional structure is
the Länder.
The Bundesrat.
Oh,
the council is what I was going to. But you can go down that route if you want to. I don't mind. So that part is, I guess, Germany was very disparate before the unification. There were hundreds of little states, so it was key to them that they kept some of their autonomy. So the Bundesrat was part of that. So all 25 regional states were represented in the Bundesrat. They had a lot of power over, says here, foreign, defence, currency, banking.
Sure.
And but the big key was the power that Prussia had in the Bundesrat.
Yes.
Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, they
14 seats were needed for a veto.
14 seats were needed for a veto, and they had 17, I believe, seats. So clearly they had the power of the veto, the Prussians.
Yeah, and the veto was for constitutional and military issues. So that's quite a big issue.
The constitution was very pro-Prussian, we could say.
Yeah, definitely with the Prussian king there. So, but it's also important to remember that a lot of power was devolved in this federal system to the states.
Definitely.
So individual states, although Prussia may have dominated the system in some respects, individual states could make their own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a bit of checks and balances in the system. Another issue for the state was that the federal government wasn't allowed to introduce direct taxes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Only the lender could introduce their direct taxes, so the federal government had to rely on indirect taxes, meaning that it often had a budget deficit.
Bit of a shortfall.
So that isn't a new thing. This wonderful state of constant budget deficits. Debt.
Okay, so I think we've covered the Constitution now. What do you want to move on to next?
Just quickly cover the social groups of this area.
Important as
they will be. Just very quickly, there were the Junkers towards the top, privileged aristocrat landowners, officer classes. The industrial bourgeoisie, clearly people who made money through industry. They went through quite a large part of industrialisation.
Another bit. The Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution. Their economy was en plein essor, as they say in France. It was mushrooming.
Cars, chemicals, electricals.
All these things.
All these things are growing.
Middle classes, professionals with their kind of trades and their knowledge.
Also civil servants.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That's growing as well at the time.
They were. The Mittelstand, kind of the artisans, the lower middle classes, skilled workers, small traders. Again, they become important later. And when the working classes, the working classes.
Kind of does what it says on the tin, but again, they're growing with the growth of industry and they're moving to the big cities.
Exactly. Trade union membership up from just around 350,000 in 1890 to over 3 million in 1913.
And as we will discover, the SPD, which represents the working classes, becomes increasingly important. So I think we've covered the social, we've covered the economic a bit there, Constitution. Is there anything else pre-1900 that really needs to be... we can talk a little bit about why German economy was so successful. I think that it has something in there. We can move on to more the political parties that were making up the Reichstag.
I think we can move on to that later, but just to end this particular episode, the succession of Wilhelm II as emperor. Wilhelm I worked very, very closely with Otto von Bismarck between
between 71 when he became Chancellor, when Germany was unified, and Wilhelm II's death in 88.
Yeah. Wilhelm I's death in 1988. And then Wilhelm's father ruled for 90 days or so, was it?
Ridiculously short.
A very short amount of time. What was his name? Frederick or... Probably Frederick or, the classic German... Friedrich III, there you go. And then, Wilhelm II became Emperor of Germany...
99 days.
In 1888.
June the 15th.
Yep, June the 15th. My brother's birthday, in fact.
There we go.
He was aged 29, and he didn't particularly get on well with Bismarck. He opposed his careful foreign policy, and instead he just wanted to boast that Germany was going to get a place in the sun. And
there was also a bit of friction there. Wilhelm I was a kind of let Bismarck get on with things, didn't interfere too much. Let the busy man get on with his business.
Let the busy man be busy.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
But Wilhelm II, a bit younger, a bit more brash. He wasn't so keen. Bit arrogant.
So
didn't let Bismarck get on with his things, and that bit of friction. And within a year, Bismarck had resigned, or maybe had been forced, whatever. Bismarck was no longer Chancellor, and that is where we will finish this episode of Nathan Remy's historical German history, not in German.
Adventure.
Adventure. I'd like to call it that.
Okay, we'll see you
another
time.
Soon.
Goodbye.